I think we can all agree that it's nice to get rewarded. The reward might come out of nowhere, be it a spontaneous visit by a dear friend for a quick chat over coffee, or when you get yourself a cool thing you stumbled over at a shop you entered on a whim. Or it might be a planned treat, something you can look forward to for some time in advance. Maybe a big trip you've been dreaming of. Maybe it's just your daily wind-down routine with a nice cup of tea and your favorite music. Either way, you'd call it a reward, but I'm sure you can relate to how it feels differently depending on whether it happens out of nowhere compared to when you already know that you're gonna get the reward. That nice feeling that you get with a surprise reward doesn't seem to kick in when you get an anticipated one. Instead, you probably feel comparable joy and pleasure the moment you can start looking forward to the planned reward, right? Why is that? What happens in your brain when you get a reward that you expect versus one that you don't expect? Or in other words, when you expect a reward, is it still a reward when you get it? To answer these questions, I will look at some research in neuroscience. But first, let me go over some new vocab so you all know what I mean when I use these terms. First, what is a reward? It's a stimulus that is subjectively desirable and or of positive value. After all, what's rewarding to a mouse might not be as rewarding to a human and vice versa. Still, things like food, especially sugary food, sex, and social interaction are rather universal rewards. And then we have prediction. That's when you draw on existing and learned data, so your experiences and observations, to estimate future outcomes as accurately as possible. This accuracy is important so that you don't waste too much energy on actions that likely won't help you, and instead focus on actions or learn new ones that will somehow ensure your survival. Now we get to dopamine and the reward circuitry. Dopamine, DA, is a neurotransmitter, which means it's one of the chemicals the cells in your brain use to communicate different information with and to one another. In the case of DA, that's information about rewards. We'll see in just a bit what aspect of rewards DA in particular is concerned with. The reward circuitry is made up of big neuronal connections from one brain area to others that, unsurprisingly, are active when it comes to rewards. The two important ones are the mesolimbic and mesocortical pathways. Meso means mid or middle, referring to how these pathways start in the midbrain, specifically in the ventral tegmental area or VTA. That's the warm yellow spot. Neurons in VTA release DA and other neurotransmitters too, but let's focus on DA for now, which is then projected to, so it reaches other areas. The mesolimbic pathway targets the nucleus accumbens, or NAC for short, the cool purple spot here. The NAC is associated with motivation, aversion, and reinforcement learning. The mesocortical pathway reaches the prefrontal cortex, colored in blue, which is involved in conscious planning of actions, decision-making, and goal-oriented behavior. With this out of the way, let's have a look at a classical experiment by Schultz and colleagues from 1997 that they did with monkeys. Spoilers: they interpreted their observations as DA neurons reporting an error in the prediction of reward. It will become clear in a second what that means. And before you wonder, CS in the figure stands for conditioned stimulus and R stands for primary reward. A conditioned stimulus is an initially neutral stimulus that by repeated association with something else, in this case the primary reward of sweet juice for the monkeys, gains corresponding value. The graphs show different firing rates the experimenters recorded from midbrain DA neurons in awake active monkeys under different conditions. At the beginning, the relationship between an auditory or visual cue preceding the reward and the reward itself hadn't been learned yet, so when the monkeys did get their rewarding juice, it was a positive prediction error, and DA firing rates briefly increased. When the cue-reward relationship had been learned, getting the juice did not correspond to a prediction error anymore. DA firing increased due to the CS, but not due to the reward itself. However, when the reward failed to occur despite the reward predicting stimulus, DA neurons transiently paused following the lack of reward. This decrease can be interpreted as a negative prediction error. Later experiments with humans also suggest that DA plays a role in reward learning. At this point in the video, we can sum up our knowledge as follows. DA is the neurotransmitter centrally involved in reward-related processing by signaling reward prediction errors, RPEs, that is, discrepancies between obtained and predicted reward. Alterations in DA release reflect changes in the environment that need to be learned. And if there are no changes, dopamine firing returns to its baseline. That's cool. But remember our question from earlier? If we just looked at dopamine firing, then a reward that occurs as predicted would not be a reward anymore because there's no increase in DA firing when you get it. But you might have the hunch that a reward still is a reward, no matter how well you can predict that you are going to get it. And that slightly philosophical angle aside, to do RPE calculations, you need to somehow encode the value of the primary reward too. And lucky us, some people looked into just that. Zhou et al. Experimented on mice and report in their 2022 paper that the VTA to ventral pallidum GABA pathway consistently keeps track of the reward value. The ventral pallidum is also part of the limbic system. It's pretty close to the NAC, so it's reached via the mesolimbic pathway, and GABA is another neurotransmitter released by VTA neurons. I told you, it's not just DA. Alright, so even when the cue-reward relationship has been learned, for example over the span of 5 days, this pathway provides a stable signal, as you can see in subfigures A and B. This DF by F in the legend refers to fluorescence changes, since the researchers use fluorescent substances to check for brain activity. The brighter the spots, the more activity. What personally amazed me the most is that the activity of this GABA projection also reflects the size and palatability, or niceness if you prefer, of the reward. The size-signal correlation can be seen in these subfigures C and D, whilst E and F show you the niceness correlation, which they labeled as dilution because the reward was a sweet liquid again that the mice received mixed with water in different ratios. Now we know that although expected rewards are not reflected in DA release anymore, they still get recorded and, in a sense, are recognized as rewards nonetheless through this GABA pathway. But that's of course not the whole story. Let me point you towards a couple further findings that hint at just how complex this reward business can get. Work by Ishino et al. From 2023 suggests that there are DA neurons in VTA that have a slower and reversed response compared to the ones we already know of. These type 2 DA neurons, quote, are not only activated by reward omission, but also inhibited by unexpected reward, unquote. According to the authors, by projecting to the NAC, which is related to motivation, these type 2 neurons might facilitate behavioral changes that enable active coping with lack of reward and the continued pursuit of rewards even when they are not guaranteed. That's one bit of interesting research. Another one has to do with drugs of abuse. They all work via different mechanisms and don't even necessarily have to influence dopamine release, but they do have in common that they consistently activate the reward circuitry, no matter how often they are consumed. This could be interpreted as the brain always recording a positive RPE, leading to behavioral adaptations that aim to ensure more drugs, even when there is no subjective pleasure involved. Looking at it this way, it would make sense why addiction is so hard to break. But that's about all I can tell you with the time I have. If any of the stuff I've brought up stuck with you, please, by all means, dig deeper, go down that research rabbit hole, and find out more for yourself. I put all my resources into the description. I hope you enjoyed this video and had fun trying to better understand how rewards work with me. Thanks for watching.